Welcome to Karma's Harvest. Today, we explore a story where silence wasn't golden, it was a weapon. We'll look at how a neighbor's calculated scheme to evict a loving family backfired in the most poetic way possible, proving that when you plant seeds of malice, you must be prepared to eat the fruit. The suburb of Willow Creek was the kind of place where people took pride in their manicured lawns and the hushed tones of their Sunday afternoons. For the Miller family, David, Sarah, and their 7-year-old son, Leo, it was a dream come true. Along with them was Buster, a golden retriever whose temperament was as soft as a summer breeze. Buster wasn't just a pet, he was the soul of their home. But every Eden has its serpent. For the Millers, that was Arthur Sterling. Arthur was a retired actuary who lived next door and viewed the world through a lens of strict, unforgiving order. To Arthur, the Millers represented a disruption. Their laughter was too loud, their lawn was too vibrant, and above all, they had a dog. Arthur didn't hate dogs, he hated anything he couldn't control. The trouble began small. A polite note about a single bark at noon. Then a stern knock at the door because Buster had dared to sneeze near the property line. The Millers, being kind-hearted people, did everything to appease him. They bought ultrasonic silencers, hired a high-end trainer, and kept Buster inside for most of the day. Yet the complaints didn't stop. They intensified. Arthur began keeping a log. Every supposed bark, every whimper, every scratch of a claw on the hardwood floor was recorded with clinical precision. He started calling the HOA 3 times a week. He called the police during dinner hours, claiming the incessant noise was causing him heart palpitations. The police would show up, see a sleeping dog and a confused family, and leave with a sigh. But Arthur was playing a long game. He didn't just want silence, he wanted the Millers gone. He wanted the house next to his to be as empty and quiet as his own heart. One Monday morning, David Miller opened his door to find a process server. Arthur Sterling was suing them for a private nuisance, seeking a court order to have Buster removed from the premises, and demanding damages that would effectively force the Millers to sell their home to cover the costs. The community was shocked. The Millers were devastated. Sarah cried as she looked at Buster, who wagged his tail, oblivious to the fact that his very existence was being litigated. Arthur's lawsuit was backed by hours of audio, recordings chilling, loud, aggressive barking that supposedly happened at all hours of the night. To any outsider listening to those tapes, it sounded like the Millers were running a kennel of agitated hounds. The Millers were baffled. "He never barks like that," Leo would sob, hugging his furry friend. David knew something was wrong. They lived in the house, they would have heard it. But Arthur's evidence was overwhelming. He even had a witness, another disgruntled neighbor, from 3 streets over who claimed he could hear the dog from his balcony. The day of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was cold, smelling of old paper and heavy silence. Arthur sat there looking like a martyr of domestic peace, dressed in a sharp gray suit. David and Sarah sat opposite him, holding hands, their faces pale with exhaustion. Arthur's lawyer played the recordings. The judge, a woman known for her no-nonsense attitude, Judge Eleanor Vance, listened intently. The sound of the barking was indeed horrific. It sounded like a dog in distress, or perhaps a dog being provoked. "Mr. Miller," Judge Vance said, peering over her spectacles, "how do you explain this? These recordings span 3 months. The decibel levels are well beyond city ordinances." David stood up, his voice trembling but clear. "Your Honor, we don't explain it, because we don't hear it. We've spent thousands on trainers who tell us. Buster is the quietest dog they've ever seen. We feel like we're living in a different reality than Mr. Sterling." Then came the turning point. David's lawyer, a young woman named Clara, who specialized in neighborhood disputes, asked to present a different set of evidence. A week before the trial, Clara had hired a private investigator who specialized in digital forensics and covert surveillance. They hadn't just looked at the dog, they had looked at Arthur. "Your Honor," Clara began, "we found it curious that the barking in Mr. Sterling's recordings always had a specific frequency. We installed high-sensitivity, night vision cameras around the Millers' property, specifically aimed at the blind spots near the fence line. She turned on a monitor. The courtroom went silent. The video was dated 3 weeks prior at 2:15 a.m. The screen showed the dark side of the Millers' house. A figure emerged from the shadows of Arthur's porch. It was Arthur. He wasn't in distress, he was on a mission. He walked to the fence carrying a long pole and a small electronic device. The video showed him poking a high-frequency whistle through the fence, blowing it repeatedly. Then he took a bag of small stones and began pelting the Millers' back door. In the infrared light, the court saw Buster, startled from his sleep, confused and frightened, finally letting out the frantic barks that Arthur was recording with a high-end, directional microphone in his other hand. But that wasn't the worst of it. Another clip showed Arthur actually trespassing. He had used a ladder to lean over the fence and spray a bitter, stinging citronella mist directly into the dog's kennel area to keep him agitated and vocal for his recordings. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Vance's face turned a shade of stormy red. She looked at Arthur, who had shrunk in his seat, his face turning the color of ash. "Mr. Sterling," the judge's voice was like a whip. "You didn't just bring a frivolous lawsuit into my court. You committed animal cruelty, harassment, and perjury. You manufactured evidence to destroy a family's life because you couldn't handle the existence of a dog." The judgment was swift and devastating. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, but the harvest was just beginning. Judge Vance didn't just stop at dismissal. She ordered Arthur to pay the Millers' legal fees in full. She also levied a massive fine for the harassment. But then she added a clause that would become local legend. "Since you are so concerned with the welfare and vocalizations of this animal," Judge Vance declared, "and since your actions have undoubtedly caused this dog significant stress and potential long-term health issues, you are hereby ordered to pay for a lifetime supply of premium, veterinarian-recommended organic pet food and all medical expenses for Buster for the remainder of his life. You will also pay for a professional behaviorist to undo the trauma you caused. You wanted to be involved in this dog's life, Mr. Sterling. Now you are his benefactor." Arthur Sterling's obsession with silence cost him his reputation and a significant portion of his retirement savings. The Millers didn't move. In fact, they used part of the settlement to build a beautiful, high-tech play area for Buster. Now, whenever Arthur looks out his window, he doesn't see a nuisance. He sees a dog living a life of luxury, eating the finest steaks and kibble that Arthur's own pension pays for every month. It is a quiet neighborhood once again, but for Arthur, the silence is now filled with the heavy weight of his own harvested karma. In the end, Arthur learned that when you try to dig a pit for your neighbor, you usually end up falling into it yourself. And in Willow Creek, the only thing louder than Buster's happy barks is the sound of justice being served.